My name is Ian Jennings, and today we'll take a look at the Haxor Developer Experience Dashboard. Specifically, we'll be looking at this project called Tesseract Test. Tesseract is a JavaScript framework for recognizing words out of images. We asked developers to get started with Tesseract.js and recognize the characters from this specific image. As our developers submit their Haxor recordings, we collect their metrics and start to aggregate them. Here we can see a trend of time spent on the task over time, as well as the individual survey responses as submitted by each developer. For every response, this shows the amount of time it took for a developer to complete the task. You can see here it's trending downward over time, meaning the task is getting easier. Next, let's take a look at code quality. This is a measure of code quality as reported by each developer on a Likert scale. We have the same for documentation, instructional clarity, task ease, and likeliness to recommend, or NPS. These 5 metrics can be customized using your own surveys. Next, we have developer pathing. This shows us what developers spent their time on during the task. And this specific chart shows us how many lines of code have been changed over time during the session. For simplicity's sake, I've isolated Randall here. We can see Randall writes 1 line of code at about 4 minutes in, and that's all he does for his session. But if we take a look at Dustin codes for about 17 minutes, and we can see that he writes a bit more code over a longer period of time. As we add our developers back, we start to understand what it's like to be a developer working on this task. You can see here Adam and Mark write a lot of code, and this is due to library imports. This happens at about 9 minutes and 11 minutes. And if we remove these anomalies, we can see again that at about 9 minutes, 10 minutes, 11 minutes, that's about when people start getting started with Tesseract. We can conclude from this chart that it takes most developers about 8 to 10 minutes to get started. Let's take a look at file types. File types tell a great story of the kinds of files developers work with during their test. For simplicity's sake, let's just take a look at JavaScript. Again, we can see that correlation between 9 and 10 minutes, some activity, but heavy in the JavaScript before reducing. Now, if we add HTML here, we can see HTML is more of an earlier way to start. What about PNG? PNG is scattered, and they may start from the beginning or the end. Let's move on to applications. Again, applications tell a story about what developers do during their time working with your product. We'll start with Terminal. Terminal is a coder's choice for setting up packages. Here, we have 2 versions of Terminal appearing in pink and yellow. We can see that early on, Terminal activity is high and then sporadic throughout the rest of the session. How about IDEs? Let's take a look at Code, VS Code or Visual Studio Code, a Microsoft product, and Sublime Text, another popular code editor. Well, here we see Sublime Text is often quicker at 2 minutes, and VS Code, again, is dotted throughout the test. If we combine this with Terminal, that looks like consistent development. What about browsers? Well, again, let's minimize these and load Safari and Google Chrome. Consistent measurements across. Let's take a look at speech. Speech is the number of words spoken per minute by a developer during the session. This helps us show high activity areas where developers are confused or have a lot to say. We can see again that trend from 8 to 11 minutes, a lot of speech is happening. Then we can see, as developers finish, we have 1 stray developer who continues talking through the test for about 35 minutes. We can see that Zach speaks early and Dustin speaks later. Dustin spends about 8 minutes before saying anything. In conclusion, we can take a look at these stats and say it takes about 8 to 11 minutes for someone to get started with Tesseract. They mostly work with terminal before switching to code, and Chrome is an important part of the experience the entire way.